San Francisco had already mastered spectacle by 1895. Royal disasters, opium dens, political corruption, bodies pulled from the bay. But even a city as big as San Francisco was not prepared for what waited above the sanctuary of Emmanuel Baptist Church, high above the pews where hymns have been sung for 10 days. This is Dead City. On April 13th, 1895, the search finally moved upward. Blanche Lamont had been missing since April 3rd. She had been last seen entering that church with a young medical student named William Henry Theodore Durant. Witnesses placed them together. A trolley ride, a walk up 21st Street, entry through the church doors. But then silence. For 10 days, the congregation prayed beneath rafters that concealed something rotting. That part is confirmed. What followed was described in court testimony and press accounts so vivid that even seasoned reporters hesitated to print the details. Blanche's body was discovered wedged behind structural beams in the tower. Her head was positioned between framing timbers. There was no massive pool of blood in the Belfry, and that matters because it suggests she did not die there. The prosecution would later argue that she was killed below, and then he drug her body all of those stairs and placed it there. Her remains were in advanced decomposition. She did have a fractured hyoid bone. There was bruising around her neck. There was evidence of sexual assault. So it was slow, physical, and very personal. That much is documented. Strangulation is not instantaneous, as most of us do know. It requires sustained pressure. It requires being very close to the person that you're killing. It requires the killer to feel the body weaken beneath their hands. And in this case, his hands. Her corset did remain on when her body was found, but portions of her underclothing were not present, and other garments had been displaced, not neatly removed, not intact. In the lower library of the church, they did find her overskirt, portions of her dress, personal effects like a small bag, and signs of a struggle. There was some blood stains on the flooring. There was a little bit of blood on a chair and blood on molding. The state argued the assault began there in the library. Investigators noted faint blood traces on the stair railings and smears along the walls, contact transfer patterns consistent with movement, not heavy pools, not any type of spray, but touch evidence. Defense attorneys challenged the interpretation. They suggested it could be old stains. Still, the stairway became a silent witness. The body was found above. The blood was found below. The implication was unavoidable. And the horror the city felt, well, it was inconceivable. Blanche's body was concealed in the Belfry while services continued below for more than a week. The parishioners entered and exited the building for days while she decomposed above them. The killer stood in those pews listening to hymns with knowledge of what he had hidden. Speculation at the time suggested the killer derived satisfaction from proximity to his nasty, dirty secret. And of course, that cannot be proven, but it does make you think. What is proven is this: he did return to the church. Witnesses described him as composed, controlled, almost clinical. Whether it was disassociation or calculation, well, that's for us to interpret. Transporting a body to the Belfry requires strength and familiarity with that structure. The stairwell was narrow. The beams were tight. The concealment deliberate. The man who is convicted of this, Durant, was the assistant superintendent of the Sunday school there. He had keys, he had access. Whether he rehearsed that concealment in his mind beforehand, the placement was not frantic. It was organized. There was no broken fingernails that were documented, no defensive tearing of the skin beneath her nails. That absence became part of the state's argument. She may have been overpowered quickly or stunned, her head between timbers up there in the Belfry, her body wedged behind beams. She was not tossed. She was not sprawled. Court records are more restrained. They describe concealment. Still, we've got to think about the fact that concealment itself carries psychology. It suggests time. It suggests thought. It suggests someone willing to carry weight upwards after life had left it. And here is something chilling but grounded. There's no evidence of a frenzy in Blanche's killing. There's a lot less spectacle than what comes next. A lot less blood than what comes next. It is intimate violence. That intimacy is confirmed. The meaning behind it, control, dominance, sexual aggression, we'll never know. Newspapers compared the case to Jack the Ripper. Hardly, right? Especially if you know what Jack the Ripper did. That comparison is definitely sensational. One detail, without even making it melodramatic, is the odor. I don't think any of us would be surprised by that. Decomposition after 10 days. It was not a vision, it wasn't a confession, it wasn't a clue, it was the decay. So we've got a body hidden above worshippers. The combination is historically documented and culturally potent. Her body remained above that sanctuary. That's not speculation, and that is record. Before the gallows, before the ink-blacked headlines, before the city coined a name meant to sound infernal, there was a young immigrant with polished shoes and careful posture. William Henry Theodore Durant entered the world in 1871 in Toronto, Canada. His father was William Durant. He made his living as a shoemaker, a steady trade, modest income, disciplined routine. His mother, Isabella Hutchison Durant, maintained the household within the moral structure of Protestant respectability. In 1878, the family crossed from Canada to San Francisco, California, not fleeing any type of scandal, not escaping law, seeking opportunity. The West promised reinvention for thousands, and the Durants joined that migration with ambition rather than desperation. He grew up in a city expanding at an electric pace. Docks, rail lines, commerce, public sermons about morality battling private indulgence, yet nothing in the surviving records point to a childhood marred by delinquency. There were no arrests, no school expulsions, no documented brutality. He had a younger sister, and accounts describe the family as orderly. Nothing in his early years foreshadows what would come. There's plenty of sites online that say there was, but that again is all just gossip and speculation. There's really nothing in the records about his childhood. By 23, Durant had secured admission to Cooper Medical College in San Francisco, and that was a serious accomplishment in the 1890s. He possessed formal education before the crime for which he was later convicted. And that knowledge does not indict him by itself. Thousands of physicians learned the same material, but it eliminates naivety. If he applied force, he understood the consequences. Classmates remembered him as intelligent, disciplined, ambitious, not socially magnetic. He listened, he observed, he absorbed. Outside lecture halls, Durant maintained visible roles that reinforced his reliability. He served as assistant superintendent of the Sunday school at Emmanuel Baptist Church, and that position placed him in an administrative role over youth instruction, honor requiring trust from clergy and congregation alike. He also volunteered within the California Signal Corps, a militia communication unit. Uniform service lent him an aura of discipline and civic devotion. They anchored him in structured environments built on hierarchy, obedience, and decorum. In an era when moral reputation functioned as currency, he possessed a lot of credit. Photographs show a narrow, clean-shaven face, save for a thin mustache typical of the decade. He parted with precision, eyes dark, steady, perhaps calculating, though photographs capture only posture, not intent. He was not flamboyant, not ruggedly handsome, not repulsive either. When you look at him, he falls into a category of respectable, young professional. Women within the congregation interacted with him without visible alarm. Some accounts suggested he engaged in courtship behaviors. Polite attention, shared trolley rides, quiet conversations after services. Witnesses later described an intensity that bordered on discomfort. He maintained eye contact a beat too long. He listened without interruption, storing details others forgot. He did not form deep, easy friendships. He hardly had any friends. His circle remained narrow. We've all met these kind of guys. That description, well, it surfaces repeatedly in records. He was reserved, observant, self-contained. No one labeled him violent. They labeled him peculiar, and there is a difference. Being strange can be misread in hindsight as menace. At the time, it often passes as maybe he was just shy and awkward. Still, several women later testified that he cultivated overlapping romantic interests within the same church community. He projected earnest devotion in one setting and flirtation in another. Compartmentalization emerges here. He did well with maintaining parallel impressions, and that requires a lot of control. After Blanche Lamont vanished, Durant did not unravel publicly. Witness testimony describes him as pale on one occasion shortly after her death, asking a church organist to fetch medicine, yet otherwise he was quite steady. He approached Blanche's aunt during prayer service and inquired politely about her whereabouts. Later, he delivered a book to the aunt's home, suggesting Blanche may have fallen victim to abduction or prostitution. Wow, that's interesting considering what we know now. What was his thought process behind saying something like that to her aunt who was looking for her at the time? It could redirect suspicion outwards. It could also show that he was trying to express concern. Again, I think this speaks volumes about just how awkward he was, but the composure stands out. He did not collapse in visible grief. He attended obligations. He maintained posture. Police records confirm that the day after Blanche's disappearance, Durant attempted to pawn women's rings in the Tenderloin district. A package later arrived at the aunt's residence containing rings associated with Blanche, wrapped and labeled with the name of the church organist. The defense attorneys argued that this was circumstantial framing. Public opinion hardened, and I can see why. There was also testimony from a young woman claiming she once encountered Durant unclothed inside the church library. That allegation entered proceedings as character evidence, though interpretation does vary. It could have been lying, it could have been a misunderstanding, or he just could have been a pervert in the church library, but naked. The courtroom became a theater. Who knows what was going on inside this guy's head? We can only study the facts, and all the facts point to that he did it. Also, unlike some of the other killers I've covered, with this one there is no psychosis in his background. There are no asylum stays, no recorded violent altercations prior to the spring of 1895. And that is precisely why the revelation hits so hard. Violence is easier to comprehend when it arrives from the margins. and it's a lot harder to understand when it emerges from the center. Witnesses in that courtroom alternate between describing him as studious and strange, helpful and unsettling. Monsters, well, they're easy to exile. Ordinary faces are not. Let's take a moment and concentrate on Blanche. Because before she became evidence, she was a plant. Her father was associated with ranching and mining interests, steady frontier labor that required grit and discipline. Her parents did not follow her west. She traveled alone. The profession of teaching offered one of few respectable paths towards independence available to women at this time. It promised wages, authority within a classroom, and social standing rooted in morality. She's described as serious about her studies, not reckless, quiet, friendly, but not forward. She attended church, she studied, she wrote letters home. She was building a life. That's the tragedy that often disappears beneath court transcripts. When you look at her photographs, they show a young woman with dark hair, gathered and pinned in the Gibson-era style that was fashionable. Her complexion appears fair, her features rounded rather than angular, large dark eyes that read as thoughtful rather than flirtatious. In portraits, she does not smile broadly. Few did in that era. Instead, she holds her chin steady, expression composed. There's a softness there, a gentleness that suggests patience. She was very attractive in the way many educated Victorian women were: modest, tidy, symmetrical, unadorned by spectacle. A natural beauty, the type of face parents would trust with their children. She looks very young, and she looks innocent. On April 3rd, 1895, just after 2 in the afternoon, Blanche met Theodore Durant at the Polk Street electric trolley stop. That meeting is confirmed by witness testimony. They boarded together. Other passengers later recalled them sitting close enough for quiet conversation, close enough that Durant leaned towards her, speaking near her ear. It looked like courtship. It looked like a young man walking a young woman home from study. They disembarked at 21st Street. Miss Mary Noble saw them walking towards the church. Miss Caroline Leake later testified she saw them enter the building together. That was the last confirmed sighting of Blanche alive. What drew him to her? Patterns provide clues. Blanche fit a profile that would have appealed to someone invested in appearances. She was very attractive, also very put together and accomplished for a young woman in that time frame. Educated, religious, modest, aspirational. She would definitely embody social respectability. If a man sought a wife who enhanced his standing, she would most definitely qualify. If a man sought access to admiration within a church community, she provided proximity to that image. She may have viewed him as a suitable suitor, medical student, church leader, disciplined volunteer. From the outside, he would appear promising. The last image we have of her is walking beside that man, who appeared respectable. Her dark hair pinned neatly, her gloves in her hand, books tucked under her arm, afternoon light still visible. She stepped through those church doors, expecting a conversation, perhaps encouragement, perhaps courtship. What she did not expect was to be raped and murdered. So we have traced what we can of Blanche. Her discipline, her quiet ambition, her steady walk towards a profession that promised dignity for a woman. But she was not the only woman whose life intersected with Theodore Durant. And that fact, well, it deepens the terror. Because if one woman can be dismissed in the public imagination as tragic coincidence, two can definitely not. The second woman was Minnie Williams, and like Blanche, she was not reckless, not wandering, not courting dangers. Minnie came from Alabama, Southern, educated, independent enough to cross state lines alone. By the mid-1890s, she had trained as a stenographer, a modern profession at the time. Stenography required speed, precision, discipline. It placed women inside offices rather than parlors. It offered wages and proximity to power. She was not dependent on charity. She was employable. She had reportedly inherited and maintained property interests back home, suggesting financial stability. Contemporary descriptions and photographs present a striking contrast to Blanche's quiet softness. Minnie appears poised, self-assured, well-dressed, hair styled fashionably, pinned and shaped with attention. Her features read sharper, eyes that suggest alertness, perhaps even amusement at the camera. She carried herself with composure that borders on confidence. Accounts describe her as attractive and sociable, not shy, not withdrawn. She moved with comfort within church circles and social gatherings. If Blanche embodied gentle steadiness, then Minnie radiated capability. Two different temperaments, both respectable. Minnie attended the church as well. It was there that she too encountered Theodore. Church gatherings were social networks back then. Evidence suggests that Durant paid attention to her. Whether she considered him seriously, it's debated. Some reports indicate that he pursued her with intent that resembled romantic interest. He fit the mold of acceptability for a young woman weighing suitors. So clearly I'm about to tell you that he murdered her, and brutally. But if we strip that away, we can picture Minnie in daylight, hands moving quickly over stenography pads, maybe an ink smudge on the side of her palm, letters drafted with precision, perhaps laughter shared after church gatherings, perhaps conversations about opportunity in a city still inventing itself. She had secured skill. She had planted herself in a competitive urban environment and held ground. That is fortitude. She did not need a husband to survive, which makes her decision to meet Durant inside a familiar building feel even more grounded in normalcy. Because she wasn't naive, she was pragmatic. She knew the environment, she knew the faces, she knew the rhythms of the church. And that familiarity does become tragic in retrospect. Minnie went to meet Durant at the church. She did not return. Unlike Blanche, her body was discovered the same day she was killed, concealed in a lower interior space within the building. Medical testimony documented stab wounds and a deep cut to her throat, visible violence, defensive injuries that suggested a struggle. Those facts stand in contrast to what happened to Blanche. The escalation in method, well, that is interesting, isn't it? It's easy to let transcripts flatten her into a sequence of injuries, but before she became a legal exhibit, she was the daughter who left Alabama seeking advancement. Why her? If Blanche offered gentleness, Minnie offered capability. A woman with property interests could represent financial advantage. A woman with professional skills could represent partnership. Whether money factored into his intentiveness remains unproven. So we have two very different women, two different temperaments, both embedded in the same sacred space, both intersecting with the same young man whose public image remained intact until discovery shattered it. And that is not coincidence, that's a pattern. But pattern does not erase humanity.
So we've done what history allows. We've given Blanche back her ambition, and we've given Minnie back her independence. Two women who crossed America for opportunity. Two women who believed a church was a neutral ground. Two futures that were cut short. And unlike so many cold cases buried in municipal archives, this time we know the name of the man who stood at the center of all of this. We know the name of the man who killed them both, William Henry Theodore Durant. What follows, it's not rumor. It's built from the court transcripts, from medical testimony, and from reporting. So we know that Blanche entered that afternoon, the church with Theo, and we know that he raped her in the library. We know that he strangled her there because of blood evidence, displaced furnishing, and then also the fact that some of her clothing was crammed into strange spaces there in the library. We know that he took her up to the bell tower, drug her up there, and stuck her body in the bell tower. We know this because of drag marks and also the fact that there was no blood up there. So we know that this guy raped this young woman, strangled her to death, drug her up the bell tower, and stuffed her in the Belfry. Then he went downstairs, and the city continued breathing beneath her. Blanche did not return home that evening. Aunt searched. Questions circulated, yet 3 days passed before an official missing report was filed. The 1895 disappearance did not immediately trigger a mobilization of police forces. Adults left voluntarily. Communication lagged. The machinery of urgency was much slower back then. So for 9 days, Blanche was absent. For 9 days, Theodore attended to his routines. The psychology is relevant here, and as you guys know, I always like to examine it, but it's hard in this case. We don't have his own words, and he denied it to his dying day. If guilty, he likely believed concealment had succeeded during that time frame, right? Because her body had not been found for well over a week. There was no obvious crime scene that confronted anyone in the church. They just saw some displaced furniture at first. So he felt, most likely, that he had outmaneuvered suspicion. 9 days without discovery can produce dangerous confidence in somebody like this. And when I say somebody like this, I'm obviously talking about a rapist and a murderer. Behavioral criminology identifies escalation as a pattern among sexually motivated offenders. Once an individual experiences violence intertwined with domination, repetition can follow, often within a short amount of time, and more importantly, with increased intensity. We've seen this with a lot of killers who rape and murder. We've seen it with Bundy and what happened as he started to accelerate and murder more women back to back, and then almost in a frenzy by the time Bundy was down in Florida, he attempted to kill more than one woman and rape them within the same night. He's not the only one who's done this. It's just this one was in the 1800s. The framework didn't exist back then, but modern analysis retrofits to this timeline. So on April 12th, after Blanche had vanished, Minnie Williams went to that same church to meet Durant per his request. And the building was again not open for the general congregation, so he knew what he was doing. He obviously wanted to do it again. So she went in there willingly. And what happened next, though, to her differs quite a bit from what he did to his first victim. Medical testimony documented stab wounds, multiple stab wounds, and then a deep cut to her throat. Evidence was again consistent with sexual assault, so he raped her. Unlike with Blanche, Minnie did have injuries that consisted with defense, so she did fight. The weapon itself was never recovered, so we don't know exactly what type of knife that he did use or where he got that knife from. But some reports say that it was like a standard pocket knife or maybe even a medical blade, so a small knife. And he stabbed her repeatedly with it and then slit her throat. The throat cut, though, is also described as severe. So again, it's almost like he was in a frenzy when he attacked Minnie. Unlike Blanche, he did not drag Minnie to anywhere else in the church. Where he attacked her, he actually ended up concealing her in that same room in a closet. And in the testimony, they describe it as a closet or like a storage space within the church there in the basement. So right after he raped her, stabbed her, cut her throat, he stuffed her into the closet immediately afterwards. The discovery of Blanche that they found up in the Belfry, she's almost positioned up there like you would a doll, positioned into the beams, her head held upright. Even though here he's murdered 2 women, the manner of which he's killed both is quite different. And this could be that maybe there was a possibility of interruption, or perhaps he had less confidence with Minnie. than the confidence that he had when he killed Blanche. So it could have gone differently for him than what he expected it to. One report describes that her sister was searching for her and entering the church. And then other accounts reference that parishioners discovered her within the storage space. So there's kind of conflicting reports on that. But either way, she was still stabbed to death and stuffed in a closet. And what is consistent in the reporting is that she was located within hours of her death. So police were summoned immediately, and the crime scene was undeniable. Blood was present, a body was present. Once they discovered Minnie, authorities wanted to search the church thoroughly. They already did know at this point about Blanche because Blanche has been missing for almost 9-10 days at this point. Well, now they found this dead body, right? They found Minnie. And another young woman, almost the same age, is missing from this congregation. They also knew that Durant was the last person to see Blanche because the aunt had brought this to their attention. They had already interviewed people at the church. Durant's name had come up numerous times, and they had interviewed Durant. So Durant was on their radar. As they were searching the church, the search obviously extended upward. And on April 13th, the belfry was inspected and the odor led them up there. So basically, they entered that tower. Of course, the odor of a decomposing body was overwhelming. And as they climbed higher, the scent got only worse. They knew at this point that most likely they were going to find a dead body up there. Even though this was in the 1800s, the investigators recognized this pattern pretty quickly. Both young women had been seen with Durant. He had the keys, the attempted pawning of the rings they had heard about. Of course, that was really suspicious. And now it became damning. When questioned after Minnie's discovery, he didn't run. He didn't confess either, sadly. He maintained composure, but everything had changed. 2 bodies eliminated coincidence. 2 timelines converged. Within 24 hours of Minnie's discovery, Durant was formally arrested. What a grade A piece of shit. And this is where we've got to pause because up to this moment, everything exists in physical evidence and is documented in sequence. 2 women entered a sanctuary, 2 women were killed inside of it, and 1 man intersects both timelines. San Francisco newspapers did not hesitate after his arrest. Headlines hardened quickly. He became the demon of the belfry. That moniker was not born from court evidence. It was born from circulation wars. Late 19th century journalism thrived on sensation, just like it does today. Reporters described him as calculating, soulless, predatory. Some articles compared the crimes to the Whitechapel murders in London, a dramatic leap, but effective in stoking dread. It is important to separate the spectacle from the transcript. The transcripts are methodical. The newspapers were more like an opera. Yet both shape public perception. Witnesses during preliminary hearings noted that Durant appeared composed. He did not weep. He did not rage. And he answered questions. Some observers described him as pale. Others remarked on his steady gaze. There is no record of emotional collapse. That lack of visible remorse only fueled the outrage. But absence of tears does not legally equal guilt. Courtrooms require more than demeanor. Still, the optics do matter. The public expected hysteria or denial. They received restraint. That's all he gave them. Restraint reads differently when bodies are involved and dead young women are tied to your name. The defense argued circumstantial evidence. They attacked the integrity of the blood interpretation and they suggested contamination. They questioned the timelines and they implied that police and press had conspired to build a case around a convenient suspect. Defense attorneys also argued that others had access to the church. They emphasized the lack of direct eyewitness testimony of the murders themselves. The defense leaned heavily on reasonable doubt. They framed him as a victim of moral panic, a respectable young man crushed beneath sensational headlines. That strategy was not absorbed for this era. Victorian trials often hinged on character as much as chemistry. Prosecutors constructed a story of calculated lure and calculated concealment. They outlined a sequence with Blanche: assault, strangulation, transport, concealment. Then they layered Minnie stabbing over it as escalation. They emphasized his training as a medical student, and they highlighted his access to the building because he had those keys. They introduced the pond rings. They introduced testimony regarding his behavior after Blanche's disappearance. The prosecution did not need a confession. They presented a pattern. Throughout the trial coverage, one phrase repeats: he did not admit, he did not apologize, he did not confess. From arrest through conviction and beyond, he insisted he had been wrongfully accused. He attributed the case to hysteria and media distortion. He never said, "Hey, I did it, I'm sorry." His parents attended the proceedings. They believed, or declared belief, that the press had condemned him before the jury deliberated. In November of 1895, after weeks of testimony, the jury returned a guilty verdict. And after that, for nearly 3 years, the case wound through legal channels. During that period, Durant remained at San Quentin. He granted statements proclaiming wrongful conviction. He never shifted. And on January 7, 1898, at San Quentin State Prison, Theodore Durant was executed. Accounts of the execution vary in tone but align on essentials. There was no last-minute admission to ease the consciousness or complicate history, just his death, and the state closed the case. In the decades since, fringe voices have suggested alternative theories, conspiracies, misidentification, planted evidence. Those claims definitely lack any substantial proof. Mainstream historical consensus affirms this conviction. There are plenty of crimes that we can look back on now and say, oh man, they definitely got the wrong guy on that. But in this case, it's pretty damn obvious that he was the killer. Still, we've got a guy who would not admit that he did this, and that leaves a narrow psychological gap. Did he believe in his own innocence? Maybe. Was he performing to the end for his family's sake? Probably. Was the denial a final assertion of control? I'm sure it was. Of course, we don't know. But when we look back at the psychological profile of this guy, from what we can read, it definitely was a way for him to still try and attempt to control the narrative, which is dead on for this personality type. So that nickname endured, the demon of the Belfry. The church's reputation definitely suffered. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'd feel all that great about having to go every Sunday to a church where 2 women were murdered. It's not the church's fault, but, it is super creepy. San Francisco closed the chapter, but the silence in the end, the absence of confession, left space for lingering unease. Because closure built on verdicts is different from closure built on admission. After the arrest, after the trial, after the rope, the building remained. The church did not vanish overnight. Services continued, but something fundamental had shifted. Attendance dropped. The church's name became inseparable from those crimes. The original building did not survive into modern San Francisco. Like much of the city, it eventually disappeared. Urban change, redevelopment, shifting congregations. It was not preserved as a landmark. It was not turned into a museum. It did not become a tourist destination in the way some infamous crime sites later would, like Lizzie Borden's house. The Belfry that once concealed a body was ultimately gone. No plaque marks that exact beam. No guided tours climb those stairs. History moved on. Today, if you search the address, you will not find the original structure standing in defiance of time, but you will find the story, and that, in a way, is more permanent. I did look it up online, by the way. There's a house there now, several houses right in a row. And even though I don't believe in things that go bump in the night, I've got to say, I think I would be a little weary about buying a home on that site. Anyways, this was Dead City. And this time, obviously, we discussed San Francisco. Some buildings burn, some are torn down, and some survive only in memory because what happened inside them refuses to disappear. Thank you for listening. If you haven't, please follow, please share, please rate. Any and all of that helps. I did my very best to keep this as factual as possible because when you're going back through the resources, there's a lot of misinformation, especially when you're reading old newspapers. But hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you to all of you who keep listening. It means the world. It really does. Stay safe, my friends.